Welcome back to AU Family Channel, and thank you so much for being here. It truly means the world to have you as one of our loyal listeners. If our stories have ever touched your heart, we are so grateful that you keep coming back to spend this time with us. So find somewhere comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and let us begin today's story, together. When my grandmother died, my whole family gathered for the reading of her will, and one by one they were handed envelopes with money inside. My aunt got the house. My cousins got savings. And when the lawyer came to my name, he slid a single folded piece of paper across the table. It was a map. A hand-drawn map, in my grandmother's careful handwriting, with a set of numbered stops and a stack of sealed letters. My family looked at me with pity, like I had been forgotten. But I would learn, over the strangest and most beautiful summer of my life, that my grandmother had left me the richest inheritance of all. This is the story of the map she drew for me. My grandmother's name was Nora, and she was my favorite person in the world. While the rest of my family saw her as a quiet, gentle old woman who baked bread and tended her garden, I saw someone who truly listened to me. I was 16 and restless, always dreaming of somewhere else, always feeling like I did not quite fit anywhere. And Nora was the one person who never told me to settle down or be realistic. She would just smile and say that some people are born with a road inside them. I did not know what she meant back then. I thought she was only being sweet. I had no idea that she was quietly describing herself. When Nora passed away in her sleep that spring, I felt like the floor had dropped out of my life. She was 81 years old, and she had been sick for a while, but nothing prepares you for the silence a person leaves behind. I kept reaching for the phone to call her. I kept expecting her to be in her kitchen chair by the window. At the funeral I could barely speak. Everyone kept telling me she had lived a full life, a simple life, a good and ordinary life. And I nodded along with them. But even then, some part of me sensed there was so much more to her than any of us had ever bothered to ask about. The reading of the will was 2 weeks later, in a stuffy office with all my relatives crowded in together. My grandmother had not been wealthy, but she owned her home and had saved carefully her whole life. As the lawyer read out who received what, I sat quietly, not expecting much, just aching to have her back. Then he said my name. He handed me a thick envelope, and inside was the folded map and a letter marked with the number 1. The letter said, "My dear one, I did not leave you money because money would only tell you what I had. I am leaving you something far better that will tell you who I truly was. Follow the map. Trust me." That night I sat on my bed and read the first letter over and over. My grandmother wrote that she had drawn a map of the places that had made her, the places she had never once spoken about, and that at each stop I would find a piece of her story and a lesson she had saved just for me. She wrote that she was giving these to me, and not to the others, because she believed I was the one who would understand. She asked me to go alone. My parents thought it was a strange gift, and worried about me traveling by myself. But I knew that I had to go. It felt like the last thing she would ever ask of me. The first stop on the map was a small country railway station 3 hours from my home, in a town so tiny that I almost drove right past it. The station was old and mostly abandoned now, with a rusted bench and a faded timetable no one had updated in decades. I sat on that bench feeling foolish, until I opened the second letter. In it, my grandmother told me that this was the platform where, at 17, she had said goodbye to a young man named Thomas. He was the first person she had ever loved. He was leaving for the city to chase a life she could not follow, and he had begged her, right there on that platform, to come away with him. She did not go. In the letter she explained why, and it was the first secret of many. When Nora was 16, her mother had died, leaving her the eldest of 5 children with a grieving, broken father who could barely function. There was no one else to hold the family together. So my grandmother, who had just won a scholarship to study art in the city, quietly gave it up. She stayed to raise her 4 younger brothers and sisters. She cooked and cleaned and mothered children who were only a few years younger than she was. And when Thomas asked her to run away to a bigger life, she looked at those children and knew in her heart that she could never leave them behind. At the bottom of that letter, my grandmother wrote her first lesson for me. She said, "I have watched you dream of leaving, my darling, and I want you to chase every dream you can. But I need you to know that staying can be its own kind of bravery. Choosing the people who need you is not the same as giving up on yourself." I lost a love and a whole future on this platform, and I grieved them both for years. But I raised 5 good people, and I would make the very same choice again. Do not let anyone tell you that a life of duty is a small life. I sat on that rusted bench and cried for a woman I thought I had known. The second stop was a farmhouse at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by fields of wild flowers that swayed gold and purple in the wind. This was where my grandmother had grown up. The house was owned by strangers now, but the field behind it was open, and I walked into the middle of it and opened the third letter. She wrote that these were the fields where she had raised her siblings, where she had taught them to read under the big oak tree, where she had held them through their nightmares. She told me that for years she had felt trapped here, angry at a life she had not chosen, watching her dreams blow away like seeds on the wind. But then she wrote something that changed how I saw her completely. She said that one of those younger siblings, her brother Peter, had grown up to become a country doctor who saved hundreds of lives over 40 years. Another sister became a beloved teacher. All 5 of them built good and steady lives, and every single one of them, she said, was standing because she had held them up when they were small. She wrote, "I thought I gave up my whole future in these fields. It took me 30 years to understand that I did not lose my future here. I planted it. And it grew into people. I stood in that field of flowers and finally understood what she meant about a road inside a person." Her lesson at that stop was about resentment. She wrote, "My dear one, I wasted so many years being bitter about the life I did not get to live. I let my anger steal all the joy from a life that was, in truth, overflowing with meaning. Do not do what I did. When something is asked of you that you did not choose, you can carry it with a closed fist or an open hand. The weight is exactly the same either way. But one of them will break you and the other will build you. I am ashamed of the years I spent resentful. I am proud of the woman I became when I finally let that go. Learn faster than I did, my love. Please." The third stop was an old stone bridge over a wide, slow river in a quiet valley town. I stood on it looking down at the water, wondering what could ever have happened in such a peaceful place. The fourth letter told me. When my grandmother was 22 years old, still living at home and raising the last of her siblings, this whole valley flooded in the worst storm the region had seen in 100 years. The river rose in the night and swallowed the low streets where the poorest families lived. People were trapped in their homes as the water climbed higher. And my quiet, gentle grandmother, the woman who baked bread, did something that day I would never have imagined. She took a small wooden rowboat, alone, out into that flood. The men of the town had been swept downstream trying to gather help, and there was simply no one else. My grandmother rode into the flooded streets in the dark and the pouring rain and pulled people from their windows one by one. She saved a family of 4 children whose roof was already going under. She went back again and again, 7 trips in all, until her hands were raw and bleeding on the oars. On the last trip she saved an elderly couple who could not swim, and the boat nearly capsized, and she almost drowned holding on to them. She never once told anyone it was remarkable. She just called it what needed doing. I had to sit down right there on that bridge. My grandmother, a hero, and I had spent 16 years thinking she was only sweet old Nora with her garden. In her letter she wrote her third lesson for me. She said, "I am not telling you this so you will think I was brave. I am telling you because I learned that day that courage is not a feeling. I was terrified the entire time. Courage is simply doing the thing that must be done while you are still afraid. Most people wait to stop being scared before they act. The water does not wait. When your moment comes, and it will, do not wait to feel ready. Ready is something you become by acting, not before it." The fourth stop was a town square with a small stone church at its edge. This was where, at 26, my grandmother had married my grandfather, a steady, kind man named William. I opened the fifth letter expecting a happy story. Instead she told me the truth she had hidden from everyone for a lifetime. She had not married William because she loved him the way she had once loved Thomas. She married him because he was good and gentle and safe, and because after years of struggle she was so very tired, and he offered her peace. She wrote that she carried a heavy guilt about this for a long time, feeling that she had cheated him of a love he truly deserved. But then she wrote the part that made me cry in that empty square. She said that over the years, in the small ordinary days, in the raising of children and the sharing of grief and the 10,000 cups of tea, she came to love my grandfather more deeply than she had ever loved anyone. Not the fireworks of a young heart, she wrote, but something far better. Something that held. She said, "I learned that love is not only the wild thing that finds you. It is also the quiet thing you build, board by board, over a lifetime, with someone who stays." I thought I had settled for less. I had not settled at all. I had chosen, and the choosing became love. Her lesson there was about the difference between the love we chase and the love we build. She wrote, "My dear one, you are young, and the world will tell you that real love is only the kind that sweeps you off your feet. Do not believe it. The most beautiful love I ever knew was slow, and plain, and made of showing up every single day for 53 years. Thomas was a spark. William was a fire that kept me warm my whole life long. When you choose someone, choose the one who stays and builds, not only the one who makes your heart race." I wish that someone had told me this when I was your age. So I am telling you now. The fifth stop was the hardest to reach, a tiny cottage on a windswept stretch of coast at the very edge of the map. By now I felt that I knew my grandmother better than anyone alive. But the sixth letter held the secret she had guarded most fiercely of all, the one she had never told a living soul, not her husband, not her children, not anyone. Her hand shook in the writing of it, and I could see it in the wobble of the letters. She wrote, "My darling, what I am about to tell you, I have carried entirely alone for 60 years. I am giving it to you because I cannot take it into the ground unspoken. Please do not think less of me." When my grandmother was 19, in the years between losing Thomas and marrying William, she had fallen in love once more, briefly, with a sailor who came through the valley and then went back to sea and never returned. And she had a baby. A little girl, born in secret in a time and place that would have shamed her family and ruined the futures of the younger siblings she was still raising. She was alone, and frightened, and had 5 other children depending on the good name she was protecting. And so she made the most agonizing choice of her entire life. She gave her daughter to a family who could raise her safely, and she let her go, and she never told a single soul. I sat on the floor of that cold cottage and read her words with tears streaming down my face. She wrote that she thought about that daughter every single day for 60 years. On the girl's birthday she would go quiet and no one ever knew why. She wrote that she had loved my grandfather and her other children with her whole heart, and yet a piece of her had always been walking somewhere out in the world that she could not follow. She said the hardest part was never knowing if the girl was happy, or safe, or loved, or if she had spent her whole life feeling abandoned. My grandmother had carried that not knowing like a stone in her chest for 6 long decades. But the letter did not end in grief. Near the bottom, her handwriting steadied, and she wrote that 4 years before she died, at 77 years old, she had finally found the courage to look. With the help of a kind woman at an agency, she had searched, and she had found her daughter. Her name was Margaret. She was a grandmother herself now, living only 2 hours away, and she had been raised by a loving family and had lived a happy and full life. And when Margaret learned the truth, she did not hate my grandmother. She wept, and she forgave her, and for the last 4 years of Nora's life, they had known each other in quiet secret, as mother and daughter at last. My grandmother wrote that she had kept Margaret's secret even then only to protect her other children from a shock she feared they were too set in their ways to bear. But she could not let the truth die with her in the ground. So she was entrusting it to me. She wrote, "Of all my family, you are the one with the open road inside you, the one who understands that people are so much more than the simple stories we tell about them. I am giving you Margaret, my darling. She is your family too." I have written her address on the back of this very letter. When you are ready, go and meet your great aunt. Tell her that I sent you. Tell her I never stopped loving her. I drove the 2 hours to Margaret's house with my heart pounding up in my throat. When she opened the door, I saw my grandmother in her eyes at once, the same soft gray, the same quiet strength. I told her who I was and why I had come, and this stranger who was not a stranger at all pulled me into her arms and held me on her doorstep like she had been waiting for me her whole life. We sat in her kitchen for hours. She showed me photographs. She told me that meeting Nora at the very end had healed a wound she had carried without even understanding it. 2 women, separated for a lifetime, given a few precious years to love each other before the end. Margaret told me things that filled in the last pieces of the map. She said that my grandmother, in their 4 years together, had spoken of me often. Nora had told Margaret that she saw herself in me, the restlessness, the dreaming, the feeling of never quite belonging. She said Nora worried I would spend my whole life thinking I had to choose between chasing my dreams and loving my family, the way she had once believed. And she said my grandmother had planned this journey, these letters, this map, for 2 full years before she died, writing and rewriting them, so that when she was gone I would understand that her life had not been small. That no life given over to love is ever small. Driving home from Margaret's house, I finally understood the whole of who my grandmother had been. Not sweet old Nora with her garden and her bread. A woman who gave up her dreams to raise her siblings. A woman who rode into a flood and saved a dozen lives. A woman who loved and lost and chose and built and grieved in secret for 60 years, and then, at 77, was brave enough to go looking for the daughter she had once let go. Every ordinary thing about her had been hiding something extraordinary. And no one had ever asked. We had all looked at a quiet old woman and never once wondered about the whole enormous life inside her. There was one letter left, the 7th, and the map ended back where it had first started, at my grandmother's own house, in her garden, under the old rose bush she had tended for 40 years. I went there on a golden evening as the sun was going down. I sat in the grass where I had sat 1,000 times as a child while she pruned her roses, and I opened her final letter with shaking hands. This was the last thing she would ever say to me, the reason for the whole journey, the answer to why she had sent me to all those faraway places instead of simply leaving me money like everyone else in the family. She wrote, My dearest one, if you are reading this, you have followed my whole map, and you know me now better than anyone ever did in my lifetime. I want to tell you why I did this. When I was your age, I thought my life was going to be one thing, and it became something else entirely, and for years I believed that meant I had failed. I want to spare you that lie. I did not fail. I lived a life of love, and love asks everything of you, and gives back more than you could ever measure. I needed you to see that clearly before you set out into your own life full of dreams and fears, the way I once did. She went on, I could have left you money, and it would have been spent and forgotten in a few short years. Instead I left you my life, understood. I left you the knowledge of where you come from, the blood of a woman who was far braver than she ever looked, and the lessons I paid for in tears so that you would not have to pay for them the same hard way. That is the only inheritance that truly lasts. Money tells you what a person had. A life understood tells you who they really were, and it becomes a map for who you yourself might one day be. You are so much more than you know, my darling. You come from so much more than you know. Then she wrote the words I will carry for the rest of my life. She said, so here is what I want for you. Chase your dreams with everything you have, and do not be afraid to leave and see the whole wide world. But when love asks something of you, and one day it surely will, do not run from it thinking it will make your life smaller. The staying and the sacrificing and the showing up, those are not the opposite of a great life. They are the very things that make a life great. Be brave in your adventures and braver still in your loving. And know that whatever road you take, you are already everything I hoped you would be. You always were. I sat under that rose bush until the stars came out, holding the last letter against my chest, feeling closer to my grandmother in her absence than I sometimes had when she was alive. All those years I had loved her, and I had never truly known her. And she had spent the final years of her life making sure that after she was gone, I finally would. It was the most selfless act of love I have ever received from anyone. She had turned her own death into a gift. She had turned her secrets, the ones that had weighed on her for a lifetime, into a map that led me straight to the very heart of who I was meant to become. I came home from that summer a completely different person. The restlessness that had always made me feel broken, I understood now as an inheritance, the same road inside me that had been inside her. The dreams I had been afraid to chase, I began to chase, because she had given me permission. And the fear I had of being tied down by family, by love, by obligation, that fear was simply gone, because I had seen with my own eyes that the woman who gave everything to the people she loved had not lived a small life. She had lived the largest life I had ever encountered. And she had done it without anyone ever knowing, and without ever needing them to. I did tell my family about Margaret, in time, gently, the way my grandmother would have wanted. It was hard for them at first, just as Nora had feared. But grief has a way of softening people, and in the end they opened their arms. Margaret came to a family dinner that autumn, and my aunt cried, and my cousins asked her 1,000 questions, and by the end of the night she was simply one of us. My grandmother had healed her family from beyond the grave, had made it larger and more whole than it had ever been. The daughter she gave away in secret was welcomed home at last, 60 years late, and yet somehow perfectly on time. My cousins had spent their inheritance within a single year. The money was gone, the savings quietly absorbed into ordinary life, forgotten. But I still have the map. I keep it framed on my wall, that hand-drawn paper with its 7 numbered stops, the single most valuable thing anyone has ever given me. Because everything else my family received will fade, but what my grandmother gave me will last as long as I live, and longer, because one day I will draw a map of my own for someone I love, and I will pass down everything she taught me. The richest thing she ever owned was never in a bank. It was in the living of her life, and she gave it all to me. Here is what my grandmother taught me, and I think about it every single day. We look at the people around us, especially the old and the quiet ones, and we decide that we already know them. We see the garden and the gray hair and the gentle smile, and we never once think to ask what enormous life is hiding just beneath the surface. Every person you pass is carrying a whole world of love and loss and courage that you will never see unless you have the grace to wonder about it. Ask your grandparents about their lives while you still can. Ask them the real questions. Because the greatest inheritance is not money. It is a life understood, and lessons handed down by someone who loved you. And the other thing she taught me is this. Your life may not become the thing you dreamed it would be. Something will be asked of you that you did not choose. And in that very moment you will get to decide whether to carry it with a closed fist or an open hand. My grandmother believed, right up to the end, that a life poured out for the people you love is not a lesser life or a wasted one. It is the greatest life there is. She proved it in a flood, in a field, on a train platform, and in a secret she carried for 60 years. She was the richest woman I ever knew, and she never had any money at all. Thank you so much for staying with me all the way to the end of my grandmother's story. It means more than you know that you were here for it. If Nora's journey moved your heart, please give this video a like and subscribe to AU Family Channel, where a brand new story is waiting for you every single week. And remember the lesson she left me. The richest inheritance is never money. It is a life understood, and the lessons passed down by someone who loved you enough to hand you the map. Go and ask the people you love about their lives while you still can. I will see you in the next one.